Hi, everybody. I'm Candid Frank Stanisci of CFL Talk. Welcome to the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV, channel 250. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download the app, make sure you rate and leave a comment. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google, Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 forward. Don't forget to also connect and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Candid Frank Live, on YouTube. Candid Frank Live, 10:30. All right, here's the star of the show. He's here, David Morassutti. He was a prima donna yesterday. You know, he had business to do, his charitable business with his church. So he straggles into the game about but halftime, I guess, about the half, at the end of the half. And he goes, "What did I miss?" And Griffin and I looked at him and says, "You missed a lot. There was a lot going on in that first half." Your mic. I think your mic's not on there, David.
Okay, you got me now?
There you go. Okay,
Wow,
repeat what you
that's
just
great.
said because I'm not a
Okay,
good.
so apparently I was muted this whole time. So I mean, it just reminded me yesterday. Reminded me why I was not going to miss that game, even like the full game, even though I had to miss part of it. I was not going to miss the full thing. That this league still remains one of the more underappreciated leagues in this country.
In North America.
North America,
I
especially.
think so.
I agree.
As a football league, right? In a universe, a world where football is king.
Yeah, no, exactly. Not even like, and it's not just a Toronto thing, because
No.
obviously we know Toronto, what the Argos do in comparison to the other teams, very unappreciated. But even the rest of the country, like this is the time of year where, okay, yeah, you still got the Stanley Cup playoffs going on. There's a Canadian team in the final this year, but like not really much going on in the sports calendar for a lot of these Canadian markets.
Yeah, with the NBA's like going, but the NBA isn't really a Canadian market thing with the Argos. Sorry, with the Raptors not in. So, and not a consideration to that.
No, exactly, right.
Interest level in that shrinks drastically because the Raptors have not done well. You're right. The game of football, if you like the game of football at all, and you don't bother to check out the Canadian Football League, you have no idea what you're missing. And the unfortunate truth is, David, they don't know what they're missing. And an excellent point was made yesterday when we were in the press box. You know what? I forgot who made the assertion, and that is, I think it was Griff, or was it not? The idea of you know, using the internet to reach people, new people.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, the internet reaches not new people; it reaches the people who've already decided they like the Canadian
That
football.
was Marcus.
Was that Marcus?
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead. Explain what he said, because I think there's a lot of value in what he said.
So yeah, I mean, look, Marcus. He's been on the program before. For those who haven't seen him, who've seen him before, he basically, were talking yesterday about, unfortunately, the crowd at the Argo game was disappointing for what it was, for the home opener, first week of the season. And he says, look, this team puts a lot of its marketing towards social media. Well, unfortunately, if you know social media marketing nowadays, there's a certain algorithm that is used to attract people to get stuff out to people. Unfortunately, that goes out to people who already are following the CFL and following this team. It's not really bringing anyone new in, based on what we've noted, based on what Marcus' assertion was. And look, I think the truth here is that, and again, I hate that we are having this conversation, but we just watched an Argos team that a lot of people were writing off.
Mm-hmm.
Not many people believe they were going to win that game against BC. Cameron Dukes talked to his teammates, talked to him. A lot of people kind of had their doubts about him. Goes out and outduels, goes toe to toe with Vernon Adams Jr. and wins his team a football game. Right, but it's not just him; it's the whole team. And what do you think? I thought the attendance was maybe 13,000.
Yeah, they didn't announce it.
They didn't announce it, which generally I think it's part of a strategy to not make it a conversation, because if people found out how many people were there, probably would have been a talking point. But you could see if you were there that it just wasn't full. And yeah, I know BC's not the most attractive team, per se. You don't get the out of towners as many, but there was a good contingent of BC fans there.
Yeah, it's not Saskatchewan.
It's not Hamilton. It's not Montreal, but it's still to me, watching that game, I'm saying there's a lot of people in the city that are missing out. Like, we talk a lot about how many people how many people watch the Blue Jay, how many watch the Leafs, how many watch the Raptors, and they're watching teams that fail to reach their potential. Yeah, the Argos have that one. I mean, the Raptors have that one championship. I understand the CFL, you have 9 teams. It makes it a little easier for a team to win a championship. Go talk to Hamilton about winning a championship in the CFL. I always hated that assertion. Oh, it's a 9-team league. It's not easy. That means the competition is just that much tougher to get there, in my opinion. Yeah, like watching that game, yeah, and even all the games, majority of the CFL games, I would say the season opener was probably the only one I was kind of disappointed. Every other game had such great excitement. A lot of good, a lot of bad. People are missing out in this country. We become sports snobs in this country.
Can I at that point, because good, you gave me a segue, because we're getting away from it. Now we're back to it. Good. The algorithm. The algorithm that they should be attaching themselves to is football in general, as opposed to football specific, the Canadian Football League. Because I truly believe that if people who love the game of football give the Canadian Football League a chance, I think that a lot of them will take part. I understand that there have been American networks that have broadcast the Canadian Football League with to be fair, limited success, right? But still, if they're going to use an algorithm, they've got to find football fans, because I just truly believe that at issue here is what you said, and it does have a lot to do with the fact that the CFL has to overcome the negativity that's blasted. It's a megaphone, of the negativity of the Canadian Football League. And then just the industrious version of the league and the teams in trying to show that their game and their teams are good to watch. But it's got to overcome that loud megaphone of, the CFL, it's the CFL, but it's not. It's a great game. I really love the game. I'm glad it's back. And I'd like to spread to another topic along with going to the game. Part of the thing that I want the fans who possibly might come to BMO to watch a game, I got a bit of good news. I didn't know, but anyway, they have an app now for parking, and the parking for the game was $15. Instead of, it was 20, 25, 30. The last 3 years, it went up by $5 each year. That makes it a little better that the parking is half the price that it was last year.
I just pray and hope that wasn't a week one glitch, and that's the price all year. Because yeah, look, when you consider what are the challenges for fans to get to games, you're in a pocket of the city right now that's under incredible construction with the Gardner Expressway. That already got people not even wanting to go out and drive. Two, the GO trains hasn't been very cooperative in terms of doing their maintenance work. It's always usually on an Argos game day, which has gotten a lot of fans not so happy. The nighttime games are very tough for families. Like, oh, Marcus was carrying his kid on his shoulders because it's 10, well, almost 11 o'clock, and some people are still hanging around the building. And then, the prices aren't bad. They came out and said that the Argos have probably one of the better value purchases in terms of sports in this sports ticket in this city. The problem is where people are trying to sit ain't cheap. They got to find a way, in my opinion, to try to entice the fans that unfortunately are seeing they're putting their money towards other things. Entertainment has changed. People you have to make people want to spend their money to go to games, right? I'm
Yeah.
not saying give it away for free, but there's got to be value attached to it.
Well,
BC is
yeah,
a good example of that.
the value that you can refer to is when the parking was $30 last year and a ticket was 28. You can see the problem, right?
Yeah.
And that, if that changes where, the affordability is clearly on the side of the Argos and the rest of the Canadian Football League teams. So I hope people give it a chance this year. We saw what happened. They built up to a great season. They the gate day at the Eastern Final was incredible. The stands were full, and then the Argos and their quarterback probably played the worst game we have seen the Argos play, you and I, in at least 3-4 years. It was horrible. It looked a lot like one of those games that we saw, where the Argos were just pathetic, losing at home and losing badly and that kind of thing. I don't mean to take away from Montreal, but the fact is the Argos couldn't run the ball. Was it Montreal alone the reason why they couldn't do it? And the interceptions that were thrown, all that stuff. It was a terrible game at the worst possible time. I can look back and say quite assuredly that if they had won that game, we wouldn't have had 10, 11, 12,000 at this game. I really don't, because all year they were building, David, with more and more people coming in, and the disappointment of that was of that Eastern Final. I don't think can be lost in anyone who's in close watching what's going on and has seen the previous games like you and I have.
Well, that's it, right? I think you're bang on that they picked the wrong time to have one of their worst games of the year, and unfortunately, there's the other problem is you're talking about a team that's had this reputation of how many years have they been talking about the attendance? How long has this been a storyline? Right? We're talking maybe what 20. I mean, most of my life, I'm
Yeah.
30 years old. Probably a good 30 years of that, right? So,
Well, let's see if we can straighten it out, and let's talk about the reason why people should go to the game, and that was the game. The game was a really good one. It was a little bit sloppy to begin with, and I think the sloppiness, David, as of first game of the year, only 2 exhibition games, contributed to the manner in which the players played, right? But it's amazing how both teams, as the game wore on, played better and better. BC first, they dominated the first half, and they really were shut down by the Argos in the second half.
no, they were. That defense. That defense is going to be. My only concern about the defense was the changes at coordinator, right? Would that make the talent drop off? But the problem is, coaching's one thing, but talent is another. They have the talent to be very successful in this league, right? You just saw it. They had Vernams running around, and yeah, like they had a lot of moments where they had a chance to get off the field. They didn't. But what made that defense, made that the defense's lives easier is that how good they were on first down. They
Yeah,
didn't give up a lot on first down. It was a lot of those plays that BC had were on second and long, and that
absolutely.
puts so much pressure on the offense. And like I always tell people, don't look past the yards thrown because they got to Vernon Jr. They had 6 sacks in that game. Like that's dominance right there.
And that's dominance over a team whose offensive line going back a few years was horrible, and they really made a concerted effort to make the offensive line better, and they succeeded in that. Part of the reason why their young quarterback that's now trying to get a job in the NFL, and why Adams can be so successful. He was even yesterday in that game, there were a lot of points in the game where he had plenty of time to make a decision about what he was going to do with the ball. But it really was it was weird because the offensive line for BC looked so really good at times, and then it leaked incessantly for others. It was a real strange game to watch. We saw some great passes, and I want to talk about the quarterbacks in the Canadian Football League later, but not now. But we saw 2 quarterbacks that did really well, and the Argos are really happy, I think, and they should be, with their rookies' performance.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, like, yeah, he's a rookie in terms of like how many games played, but and experience, but he didn't play like a rookie, and like technically he wouldn't even be a rookie because he played last year,
2 games.
so he started 2 games, but he played in the rest of them. Like he wouldn't. That's why he wouldn't be eligible. I would say a newfound starter quarterback.
He has the ability, and he's a lot like Kelly, where he's a fighter. He's a guy who takes up the challenge and not afraid to run upright, which I asked him about after the game, and he acknowledged that he needs to be a little more careful about that.
He does. When you're a quarter, it's funny. When I talked to him earlier in the week, he says, "Well, I'm not a quarterback that likes to run that much. I don't want that to be part of my game." But that is his game. That is his
Totally,
game,
totally.
right? And so, I think the big one here is he's got to be he realized a lot like Kelly did last year. When you're running a lot, you gotta be careful about what it's going to do to you.
Absolutely. The other trait that he had a lot like Kelly is the moment that he makes a mistake. It sure seems like Kelly, he worked away and not compounding it. He got over his mistakes. He made some mistakes early in the game, and he recovered and figured out how not to make mistakes. Obviously, identified the fact that he has to eat the ball at times. Ball security is so important on this show. Anybody that watches this show or listens to what we talk about, and I am a total supporter of the idea that quarterbacks, positive things that they can do, can be erased a lot by simple mistakes and mistakes of not protecting the ball. And he learned to protect the ball in that game. All right.
Well, and look, we were talking about how great he did in the game. Everything just everything he was doing so well. But what was he talking about mostly? The fumble,
Absolutely.
right? Not you can be happy about what you've accomplished, but if you're not willing, if it's those moments there, um, you have to be, as a quarterback, you have to be honest about where your expectations are. I just think that that's also the sign of the culture of this team. The reason why I never expected really Toronto to, even though with Chad Kelly suspended, why I wasn't, yeah, it's a tough blow. Why I wasn't concerned about them being able to compete is the culture there.
Absolutely.
And look what Cameron Dukes, he made that start last year in Winnipeg. went toe to toe with a team that was a top team in the West that went into the Grey Cup. That to me, and I think that was the game there where Ryan Dinwiddie realized, okay, I can trust this guy to be our quarterback when we need him, and he did that.
Yeah, he's not your prototypical, you know, third and short quarterback,
No, he's not.
right? And so, he fits more the mold of what I think the Canadian Football League is starting to promote, and teams themselves. We talked last week about the fullback taking the snap. Where now you have a quarterback, the legitimate 1 and 1A, as opposed to quarterback that does the quarterbacking, quarterback that does the short yardage, and then the personality of the short yardage quarterback, heavy concentration of size, and strength and ability to capture those 2 or 3 yards or less a yard. And with the advent of the new rule where you can have 2 quarterbacks in formation, the table's being set, David, and I think it's a great thing where quarterbacks that can start are getting more opportunity to actually play in the game and play the way they need to play to be, like you said, you ordained him a number 1 quarterback. And I know you did that, lightly. You weren't guaranteeing it, but he looked like somebody that could be a starter.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like we saw some of it. Of course, it's one thing to do it over a game or two, and it's another to do it over the course of a year. That's what makes a starting quarterback different. Knowing each and every game, you know what you're going to get from them,
and doing it in the red zone.
Yeah, no,
right?
exactly.
Because that's where Canadian Football League quarterbacks. That's where you separate the starters that are stars and the starters who are starters. There's you can get a lot of quarterbacks that'll get you downfield, but just can't seem to get down to the last 20 yards and into the end zone.
Yeah.
And you need that in the Canadian Football League. And the only way that they can do that and the way they can become that is that if they're given the ball under center. How can you learn to be a starter when you're only called out when you've got a yard to go, and you get into that formation? It's not. We should realize that isn't the way to develop quarterbacks. I think the way they're doing it now, it'll help a lot more. And as I said, teams are starting to use fullbacks under center because why not? If you're gonna, train a quarterback or retrain a quarterback into being a short yardage guy, why not teach a fullback to to take the hike and run? He does half of the job already normally.
Well, that's it for me, right? I've never been a true fan of how the like with the way that they've done quarterbacks in this league, because usually the second quarterback learns and they learn. But you know what? More and more,
They have to learn doing what it is that they're going to do.
exactly. And you're seeing teams now start to put these quarterbacks out there in those situations.
Absolutely, it has to happen. It has to happen. Look, Bo Levi. Not to change games. We'll talk about him as well. We'll talk about the Hamilton game. Let me pause there. Let's finish with the Argo game, and we saw Kadeem Carey and Adeboye run the ball for the Argos. I think those are the 2 guys that are going to do it for the Argos if health being possible for both. I think those are the 2 running backs for the Argos, and I think that's a pretty good combination.
It is. I do think that that's something that's going to help. Again, is another thing that's going to help this help Cameron Dukes is to have a running game like that. Now, they're going to have some. They're going to have to work. There's going to be some. Like BC's defense was good. I don't know if they were great yesterday. It's like they had some really punishing hits. But I'm curious to see if what's going to happen when a team takes the running game away. Will the Argos abandon it, or will they keep trying to make it work? I mean, that's going to be crucial too.
But you're right because see, the thing is, how do you gauge in game one when defenses and offenses are still trying to figure things out because
Mhm.
they didn't get much time to play as a unit. And then you take two teams like BC and Toronto who've had a lot of change. The Argos is specifically on defense and special teams. Mickey Donovan, the talk was that in the offseason he's going, they're taking away all my guys. They took Leak and they took a lot of other guys from him, and they've replaced them. And as it turns out, he's got the guys that can do a good job. The one guy that well, I should say two, Serezna, he was eye popping. He made, he took a leadership role there. Not that he took the job away from anybody in the defense, but he helped, raise the level of each player because now each player doesn't have to be as impactful as they were last year. They get a chance to grow within the position. And we heard Brinkman say it after the game.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, look, that's a defense that's got personality. Uh, all guys who do something kind of different, and they're kind of built differently too. But I think you give credit to the coaching staff, right, for putting these guys and like these guys moving them around. Ryan Nimley said the thing about Jake Serezna: first down, he's lining up inside. Second down, he's moving to the edge. How many times do you see a guy on the defensive line move from the center to the edge? Right? And I think in the CFL, it all starts with that the front seven on both sides of the ball. If you got a good defensive line, your defense is going to be solid. If you got a good offensive line, your offense is going to be solid. It reminds me of why, yes, the Argos lost some talent, but they didn't lose that. They didn't lose that identity, in my opinion. They bolstered it. Ryan Nimley said after the game he thinks the defensive line is better this year than last year, and last year was pretty darn good.
Absolutely, absolutely, and the thing that hasn't changed with the Argos, and we're only going by one game, so don't hold me to this, but for now, the one game, the halftime adjustments, that's been Ryan Dinwiddie's calling card with the Toronto Argos, where that team finds a way to play terribly in the first half and then adjusts everything, comes out the second half gangbusters, and they did it. They did it really well against a really good team yesterday.
Oh yeah, I know. I mean that's the thing, right? Both teams, both teams need to be at. Maybe they weren't at their best, but they need to be at a high level. Whoever was going to win that game was not going to win that game by a fluke.
And Liram Hajrullahu, well, he's back, and a little bit of a slow start, but he got back in a rhythm. He's a big time kicker. Another guy. When I talked about Mickey Donovan's special teams, Boris Beatty's going what? And then you get Liram Hajrullahu. That's a pretty good trade.
Yeah. It's not often you get to let a top kicker in the league go and replace him with a guy who has had probably one of the better track records of success in the CFL. And look, I was still surprised he came back.
Yes.
I talked to him during training camp. He was prepared to go back to Hamilton. He was in talks to go back to Hamilton, but the scheduling didn't work out because he works in downtown Toronto or near downtown, so he can go from Argos practice to his job and do his job. And the practice schedule wasn't really working out, and then Hamilton decided to go in a different direction there.
Mm-hmm.
As
And
well.
you know what? This is part of what the Canadian Football League is all about. It isn't just about signing a contract; it's about building a relationship with a community. And in his case, that's what the key was. Last word on the Argo BC game for you?
I think both teams should be these are two really good teams. Like we saw, like I think people maybe will give Toronto a little more respect, hopefully. but at the same time, Toronto, I think that was a key victory for their confidence.
What game you want to talk about next?
Let's go over. We'll go in reverse order. We'll talk about Saskatchewan and
Funny, that's exactly who I was thinking, and I didn't want to.
Saskatchewan Edmonton.
And there's a reason why I wanted to talk about Edmonton. 75 years in the league. You would think that with teams that have been over 100 years, that they would be one of those teams. I kind of it took me aback. It was at 75 years. I would have thought of Edmonton being another one of those 100-year teams, but it wasn't. And Saskatchewan and Edmonton, we've talked about this before. And David, they're two teams that have a lot to prove this year. Their starting points are a little different. We know unfortunately, how badly Edmonton played last year. And we know how disappointing Saskatchewan last year was. And here they are meeting in the first game. Very interesting. A lot of new guys on both teams.
A lot of new guys on both teams, and a game I didn't think either team got off to a bit of a slow. I mean, Saskatchewan especially got off to a slow start. It was a little sloppy this game, in my
Absolutely.
opinion.
Again, first game, 2 exhibition games, a lot of changes, a lot of character building, a lot of cohesiveness to develop. But they got the right guys there. Corey Mace is you saw him in that game when you start getting penalties and start becoming undisciplined. He did not wait for it to get worse immediately. He was on the sideline letting everybody know this ain't acceptable. You don't do this kind of stuff. And Saskatchewan unfortunately has some guys, it seems, historically that do tend to cross the line a little bit.
I mean, yeah, they play with an edge for sure. I also just think that when you look at this game in particular, Edmonton learned very quickly that no lead. How many times do we have to say this, Frank? No lead is safe. 13 points is nothing.
Absolutely
nothing. The Argos allow 13 points in like 2 minutes against BC.
That's
like
right.
it happens in the CFL. There's no lead that's safe. And so I do think that teams are going to have to. That's an adjustment teams are going to have to make, to get themselves, especially a team like Edmonton. That this is not a team that should be underestimating anybody.
Absolutely.
Look, you've had one of your worst stretches in franchise history. No, there should be no reason to left the foot off the gas pedal.
No.
And there's no reason why one receiver and Sean Bain Jr.
Oh my goodness.
should be torching you.
Oh, he was amazing. He was the bane of Edmonton's existence.
He was.
He totally was. He was incredible. And Trevor Harris, look, no one should be surprised in his accuracy, right? We know he's an accurate quarterback. We know historically he had problems in Ottawa, making it, the red zone was one of his foibles, one of the things that he needed to work out. But he sure looked good in this game.
I think he
did almost every quarterback. I think this was the best week of quarterbacking in the Canadian Football League that I can remember in recent memory. As a whole.
Yeah, I would say it's a pretty close assessment. Like there wasn't a quarterback. I mean, okay, maybe the worst quarterback performance of the weekend was actually the guy who probably shouldn't have had the worst quarterback performance of the year. We'll look at him a little later.
Leave him alone. No,
but McLeod Bethel Thompson, I think for his return to the league, yeah, I think you're gonna look at it and say it wasn't great, but wasn't dreadful. But you would think by his standards, not good enough, right?
Well,
like
it's not all on him, right? It's the team too. They're they need to really earn some confidence, gain some confidence. The one thing you've got with McLeod Bethel Thompson is he's stubbornly committed to winning.
Yes.
Some people may not even like the way he is so assertive, right? But you know what? I think that team needs that kind of personality. They need McLeod MBT's assertiveness. That team needs it. And Chris Jones can do it on the sidelines, but it's about on the field. I always talk about leadership and how great it is that you have leaders in the locker room, or you have leaders at training camp, or you have leaders on the sidelines. You need leaders on the field of play. And McLeod Bethel Thompson is one of those guys. And I think, given time, I think he'll return to the kind of success he had with the Argos. Um, he knows what it's like to go from what Edmonton was to what the Argos became with him, right? He has that experience, so he knows how to get there. He knows what it looks like.
Yeah. I think that's part of the reason why he's here.
Absolutely, that's why.
He's a guy that, again, leadership. We talk a lot about Trey Ford and what's next for him. I think Edmonton wants him to grow, not just as a player, but as a person. And there's no better player to help him do that than McLeod Bethel Thompson.
It was unfair of Trey Ford to be put in the position where people are clamoring for him to start with literally very little experience in the Canadian Football League. And we talked about Dukes of the Argos. Now, he's been in the background, only brought forward when he was in a less than total pressure situation, right? Well, Trey Ford, his whole time in Edmonton, is every time he started, it was pressure, because someone dropped the ball before him, and now it's up to him to be the better quarterback, the perfect quarterback. The guy's human, and he's got to learn. So I think it's good for him that he sit back and work with McLeod Bethel Thompson. McLeod will teach him a lot in the quarterback room, and he'll teach him a lot on the field as well. And also when he gets to the sideline and Trey Ford and he have some conversations, there'll be some good conversations that'll help Trey Ford because of MBT's experience.
Oh, no doubt, right? I would also like it if Winnipeg would have ran the football a bit more than they did in this game. I know it wasn't effective.
That was surprising. That was surprising. And Winnipeg's not a team that gives up a portion of their game just because it isn't working. They figure out a way to plow through, right? That's their whole reputation. Smash mouth football.
Like, I looked at Edmonton there. Yeah, they put up the passing yards, but they didn't run that much. They only ran the ball. I'm looking at the stats here again to remind myself. They ran the ball. Technically, they ran the ball 30. With their running backs, they had a total of 12 carries. That's with McLeod, Prukop, Leak, and Kevin Brown. And they didn't manage much on the ground there. Like that's I think the sad part is I think it was like 39 yards. Like yeah, look, the Saskatchewan's got such a great defensive front, good defense, but you can't let them bully you into going out of what you want to do. Kevin Brown was a 1,000-yard rusher last year. You've got to find a way to get him involved so that it makes your offense less predictable.
Absolutely. I mean, it's facets of the game. You have three different groups of players that each one of them contributes to a winner. And when one doesn't contribute, you're not going to win that easily. I mean, we've seen teams win with just a great offense and overcome the deficiencies of a defense and maybe even sometimes special teams. But you really have to have two of the three working to win. At least two of the three, if not all three.
Mm-hmm. Of course, you need all three phases to do as best as you can.
Yeah, and Edmonton's got to learn, man. Hey, look, the nice thing about Edmonton is that they can work under the radar for a little bit because their cohabitator in Edmonton is the Oilers, and the Oilers are in the Stanley Cup final against Florida. So there's an opportunity for let's just say hard-hitting criticism not landing on Edmonton at this very important time in their season, the very early beginning part of the season, where they can start establishing their reputation as a team, an organization, and also a team that shows that they can actually make the playoffs. That's where they're at right now, and it's got to happen for them.
And they need to not spoil their opportunities at home. They
Right.
just lost their first game at home. If you're
Yes.
Saskatchewan, you win your first game on the road, you're feeling pretty good about yourself. But one thing we have to also mention, Frank, what hasn't changed in Edmonton is the fact that McLeod Thompson likes to throw to Curly Giddens Jr.
No kidding.
12 targets, 9 of 12 in that game.
Yeah.
But it was always Eugene Lewis that's going to be the straw that stirs the drink there. He is their big time receiver. And look, give credit to Trevor Harris to lead his team, right? They were down, but they weren't out, and he led them. So good on them for getting that win.
Yeah, and Saskatchewan really, 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 along with Edmonton, but even more so with Saskatchewan, because as I said at the beginning of this conversation with these two teams, Saskatchewan had a head start on being a good team. They just were unfortunate last year. They had some bad luck last year. They changed their coach, their head coach. You know, they had problems with discipline, all these kinds of things that were not as big as just not having a team together that can win. So
Mhm.
yeah, so you and I both, we have a lot of respect for Coach Mace. He's a great guy. He's a very straightforward, straight shooting kind of guy. He'll be perfect for Saskatchewan. And yeah, I wish them a lot of luck. Saskatchewan, I have so many friends that are Rider fans, and I'm happy for them because they're happy right now because of their coaching and because they have a healthy quarterback. It's important, and just I really believe this is going to be an interesting year because there are going to be some battles for playoff spots. Crossover, maybe even that, but I think within each division, more than any other year, there's going to be competition for a playoff spot, and these two teams are two of the reasons I can say that. They
Mhm.
will either make it come true or make me look silly.
You look silly. Never.
Oh yeah, always, but maybe not in this instance. Hopefully not. So Saskatchewan beats Edmonton in game one, and the next game, and we'll start with Bo Levi Mitchell, who was taken out of the game because of concussion protocol. Um, he goes into a place where he was used to winning like 80% of his games, right?
Mm-hmm.
Goes to play that game, and he's like, I think he's like 2-6 with Hamilton or something like that. Sorry, I have the stat wrong. I know I do, but the point being, his record in Hamilton is nowhere near as good as the one in Calgary. And now he goes to Calgary, and he gets this chance to show what he can do. David, what did you see?
I mean, I think we saw obviously a better Bo Levi Mitchell than we had been seeing
In
from past
Hamilton,
years,
in
right?
Hamilton.
Yeah, this is the Bo Levi Mitchell I think that they wanted to see. I mean, I was just surprised what I saw from Calgary.
Oh, I gotta say, I agree with you. I mean, this organization looked like it was gonna flounder, but what do you do? What do you say about one game? Well, what you say is Calgary looked really good, and Mayer, he looked like he lost some weight. He looks a little more mobile, and his accuracy a lot better than
Uh,
it was last year.
that's a big
And
one. He not a single turnover.
not one,
He's
not one.
he's a player. If he protects the football, they've got the running game down packed where they can really be a good tough team to beat because for them ball security is everything and and owning the clock obviously with Calgary, if you give them a lead, they're so good at defending a lead. They're one of the better teams in my opinion in the CFL at defending a lead because they've got such a good run game that they can eat clock. They can move the chains. They can bully defensive lines and move the chains with their running game. So, and look, we saw some opportunities missed by Hamilton, like that potential touchdown pass to Tim White that he couldn't they couldn't reel in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Uh, but again, if you're Hamilton, yeah, losing sucks, but they didn't lose in the way that it was one of those wins where you can no loss is good, but this is a loss I think you can hang your head a little bit higher because they were very competitive right from the start.
5 minutes for Montreal and Winnipeg. I was surprised to see a lack of fight
Yeah.
in Winnipeg against them at home.
Yeah, that was. I thought that offensive performance was very, very disturbing.
One of the quarterbacks that didn't look really good this week was Caleros.
Yeah, very inaccurate, missing throws, but also that offensive line did not do many favors.
Well,
Hamilton, I mean, it's Hamilton. Montreal's defense, that was their MO ever since they added Sankey and Lemon. Now, how long they'll have Lemon for, we'll see.
he's getting, the suspension doesn't kick in because he's protesting he's fighting it, so he can play until the decision's made.
Right, and so you're taking advantage of that if you're Montreal at this point, and yeah, I mean they're tough. If you are going to beat Montreal, you got to neutralize that defensive front.
Absolutely.
Montreal didn't really I mean, sorry, Montreal offensively, I thought they were very lackadays. Yeah, they had the flea flicker. They took advantage of some very Winnipeg like mistakes. But I thought anything really anything there that really caught me and say, yep, this is a team that can go back and repeat as a champion. Based on what I saw from the other teams this weekend, I thought Montreal should have won that game handedly, but they gave Hamilton. I mean, they gave Winnipeg opportunities to get back in that game.
They sure did. Winnipeg has a lot to prove, but they've proven one thing. One thing has been proven: their middle linebacker, if he's out, they're not as impressive.
No, that they certainly need that leadership there. It's sorely needed. And I mean, look, they also have some new corners, younger guys who haven't really played in the
Sorry.
CFL. Those are crucial. That was something that Montreal looked at and says we're gonna go right after them. Jason Moss is like that though. He's ruthless. He knows if there's any potential weakness, you got to exploit it.
Absolutely. A great. Well, you know what? You've got to admit, and anybody has to admit and realize that Montreal's for real. What we saw last year was not an accident. It was not a fluke. It was real, and they came out. We talk about teams that have something to prove. I mean, if you win the Grey Cup, what do you have to prove more than beating the team you beat in the Grey Cup that won 2 Grey Cups in the last 4 years and do it the way they did? That's quite an achievement, David.
Well, and look, obviously, to do it in Winnipeg as well.
No kidding. Yeah,
right.
That was something else.
They don't lose it at home very often. So I think that was even more impressive for Montreal to do that. But again, Montreal, I think if you're a team that's going to play Montreal, don't beat yourselves. Montreal likes to make teams beat themselves, make the mental error.
Absolutely. Really, really, really good team. The Eastern Division, we talk about how it's been growing and how it's becoming more and more competitive. And now you've got 2 Grey Cup champs, back to back from the East. And, that's what we're looking at. We got a couple minutes here and talk about the quarterbacks. Fajardo looked good. He did what he does, right? Doesn't make any mistakes and is methodical in what he does.
I saw more running out of him than he didn't really run a lot in the playoffs. I wonder if there was a specific. I think they didn't want to do that. But yeah, I saw a little more of that. He was more calculated in what he was trying to do.
We panned Caleros on his quarterbacking skills, which in a way also, in Hamilton with Bo Levi Mitchell, he didn't have a great game, but I gotta say, he showed some signs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where getting off to a good start is so important, but it's also finding those areas of improvement. There's gonna be a bit of give and take in those areas for sure.
Absolutely. And then we've got Calgary. We talked about the mayor. Uh, Played really well, and you know what? He looked a lot like the guy that was. It's ironic, isn't it? The game that first game Bo Levi plays in Calgary. Mayer plays like the quarterback that they were hoping was replacing Bo Levi Mitchell. This is the best. That was the best I've seen him in the years that he took over from Bo Levi Mitchell.
I think so, and I think that's what they were. That's what they're hoping to get last year. Now, if they're going to get this type of quarterbacking from Jake Mayer, I'll renege my thought of them being a playoff team. I think they'll make the playoffs,
Yeah.
but I think Hamilton was also just not themselves. They'll get there.
Edmonton, McLeod Bethel Thompson, a quarterback that has to get adjusted to the team that he's with. We know what he can do. He wasn't. He looked like it was his first game back in the Canadian Football League on his new team.
Yeah, exactly, and it's going to take time. He's also a slow starter. He gets better as the year goes along as well.
Yeah, he builds up momentum. BC Vernon Adams showed us who he's been forever. It seems, really, really, really good, and sometimes makes mistakes. Right. That's who he is, and that's who he was then.
He was running. He was the running man all game long. Credit to the Argos defense for having him on his toes, but he also made some incredible throws.
And Dukes for the Toronto Argonauts was the quarterback playing this week that I think was the one projected the least of all to have a really good game, if you know what I'm saying. And I don't mean that he doesn't have the talent or the ability, but his inexperience, he was the most inexperienced quarterback going into week 1.
He was, and he didn't look like it.
No, he didn't. He looked really good.
He's got a heck of a receive. And look, he was missing a couple of guys, a couple of regulars in the lineup, like Coxie especially. Didn't phase him. Spread the ball around. Guys made plays for him. That's what you need for your young quarterback. Your teammates need to pick you up a little bit. And they did that.
And it was a good week for quarterbacks and non-injuries. The closest we got to an injury was Bo Levi Mitchell sitting out because of a concern with a concussion concern. But the rest of the teams, the quarterbacks had a great week. Knock on wood, let's not ruin it, because the Canadian Football League, without a good quarterback, is an ordinary league. But with really good quarterbacks, it is one of the greatest football leagues going.
Yeah, that's the name of it, right? You want every game to be competitive. What better way than have good quarterbacks playing?
Absolutely, and it was really good news not to have any injuries, because we've seen that too many times the last couple of years. And again, I'm knocking on wood because I'm not trying to change that statistic for this week. David, this was a pleasure as usual. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you, Frank.
All right. He's David Morassutti. I'm Candid Frank. Thank you for watching. Of course, CFL Talk airs live on Mondays at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Network. For CFL Talk news, entertainment, and other sports programming we offer, please check out SpanglishWorld.ca. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, live it. Thank you for watching, everybody. And don't forget Candid Frank live Stanisci on YouTube. Until next time, enjoy the football coming up, folks. Starts Thursday again. I love the separation between games.